Thank you for having me here. This is to Chinmay Mission, Columbus. And thanks to Mr. and Mrs. Gopi for having it here. May God and Gurudev's blessings be on them and their family completely. Thank you. Many of the faces I do recognize. There are a lot of new ones. So Hari Om to all of you. Today's topic is self-worth and self-respect. The topic is very abstract, but I'll try to make it as lively and as contextual as possible. The format that we will observe is that first 1 hour I will try to go through the topic, and the last half hour is open for question answers. So as many questions as we can take, and hopefully I end after 1 hour with less of confusion, so less of questions. But if I do rake up a lot of confusions, then I do take responsibility to answer them as well. So this topic of self-respect, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, etc. It has to start with the understanding of the common word. What is the common word in all of these?
Self.
Now, how we define ourselves, or how we define this word self, gives or sheds light on all the other words that it is accompanied with. We can see self as various things. Self as what? Probably self as a person, as a person's personality, self as a physique, a physical aspect, self as the emotions, self as the ideas, self as the convictions, self as, what we perceive ourselves as, self as what we want others to perceive us as. There's a huge gap. And that will be a major focus of our discussion. Self as what we really are, though what we perceive and what we are may be a huge difference. And finally, self as what we should be as per the definition of that self. This is a huge topic. And we could have covered all 5 days with this one topic. And let's see in a concise format how we can cover this. Apart from the kids, most of you must have watched this beautiful Hindi movie, old movie, called Abhiman. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, many heads are nodding. Who are the ones in Abhiman? Just to make sure that we are talking the same language. Because sometimes there are remakes and we get confused. So it was very beautifully portrayed. What was portrayed was the clash of two Abhiman. And it was very nicely titled. Abhiman. What does Abhimana mean? Abhimana means, mana means They use this in Sanskrit, Hindi and various other languages, Indian origin languages. Man or Maryada. So mana actually in Sanskrit means to measure. Mana means to measure. Measure what? Anything. And that is why we say the calculation of measurements is called parimana. Again, the root word there is man. And that's the same root word that we use even in Hindi when we want to understand ascertain somebody's statement and understand its meaning. Mane kya? That mana means to ascertain the measure, the depth, the understanding of it. So there are different categories that we measure. Liquids we measure in, what is the mana there? Liters. Or if you want to get confused, then in gallons. The reason I said confused is because you have an American gallon versus a British gallon. How do you measure temperature?
Celsius, Fahrenheit, Kelvin.
Celsius and Fahrenheit. Again, there is a confusion because the British, they say it is 98.4 and the American, they say 98.6. I'll take an average, 98.5 as the normal temperature and pressure. These are all different measurements for different things. Similarly, abhitaha mana, from all angles possible, we measure ourselves. Constantly we are measuring ourselves. Especially on a new year, when we have to take resolutions. And you stand in front of that mirror and very few people are like him.
Like who? Like whom? Yeah.
He understood it. That we stand in front of that mirror and then look at different layers of tires and say, kuch to karna padega. I should do something about this. So at a physical level, we are constantly reading ourselves. What is the weight, what is the height, what is the color, what is the texture. And here when I say BMI, it means body mass index. So we have a constant measure of it at a physical level. And no Indian ever calls themselves brown. That word was introduced to me after I came to US. And back in India, we never call ourselves brown. We call ourselves with respect to different shades of wheat. Wheatish. Even in Hindi, it is गेहूं जैसा सावला. गेहूं जैसा सावला. So it is a different measure of the color. And the pulse of the nation can be seen through its advertisements. Right? Back in India, they are all, nowadays they have even released a whiteness cream to even men. There's nothing fair, there's nothing lovely about it, but they call it fair and lovely. Or fair ever, fair and lovely. That is because the nation wants to turn itself. I think it is a psychological thing that those who are brown or dark brown want to become white. And you come to this country, they are white, they want to tan. Never satisfied with what we are. But we want to measure at a physical level. What is our height, how smart do I look, how beautiful do I look. At a physical level, there is a gauge, there is a measure for ourselves. At an emotional level, we carry the same kind of measure. I am very good with my emotions. I might get irritated, I might get angry, but I keep them in control. Or I am an emotional wreck. I am a good person as long as my emotions are not toppled. Once that is toppled, you don't want to be in front of me. These are the statements that we make. We know our measure, that at an emotional level. The amount of clarity that we carry, the amount of confusions that we carry is at the intellectual level. The kind of ideas that we carry, the kind of convictions that we carry, abhitaha, from all possible perspectives. And if I may add, there is one more perspective to add into it. What kind of house? Especially coming from Texas, there everything is big. The roads are bigger, the houses are bigger. Like people who move from anywhere up north or the west coast to Texas, the minimum house on an average is about 4,500 square foot. Average. From there it all starts. It's a small house. 4,500 square foot is a small house. And the house, especially Indians, where would we want to buy a house? हाँ, temple by mistake किसी ने कह दिया. Usually that is not the measure. The measure is again school district. How far are you from the office or what is your commute is all secondary. The first primary condition is what is the school district. I mean, this is all my observation, okay, in 10 years. Tell me if I am wrong. School district is the primary condition. So the school district is a measure. And in that school district, a north facing house. Anything other than south facing.
Even the realtors know that.
Yeah, even the realtors know that. In Dallas, they have a new, the billboard which says that in this neighborhood we are building most of the houses north or northeast facing. I don't know how it is possible that all houses are that. But still, that is the advertisement. That is the catchword. So that is the second criteria. And how well that house is. Externally, internally. Because I gauge myself, my worth, through that as well. Car is a means to take from point A to point B. But then the self-worth is added in through that what I drive as well. Even the kids these days, how young do they ask for a cell phone?
9, 10.
Let me ask the kids. How many of you already have a cell phone? Okay, the smallest one that I see is, do you have a cell phone? No. How old are you? 10, 13 years old. And what is your cell phone? And what make is it?
An iPhone.
You wanted to say that.
iPhone 5.
Is it 5?
No, 4.
Did you hear the reaction? No. It's still 4S. The phone that you carry also makes a statement about you. The clothes that you wear makes a statement about you. The vehicle that you drive makes a statement about you. Carries a worth. Everything that we interact, in fact even the people that we associate. I'm told people join Harvard, Stanford, not because of education. It is because of the tag that you get and the association that you can leverage yourself into, which creates your worth. All these included, put together, is called the individual's abhimana, or a calculated total amount of self, and that is called worth, self-worthfulness. That is our estimated value. Rather, if I have to put it precisely, it is a guesstimated value. It's a guess. That is what I think myself to be. Based on this self-worth, on this abhimana, we create what is known as a shape, akara. And this shape or akara of I is called aham kara. Aham akara. Akara is a shape. I'm trying to put these words in as user-friendly terms as we can understand. Ahankara, akara means a shape. Like when you start cooking your rotis, what akara they are in? They need to be in circle. That is the ideal situation that you want to reach to. Have you started rolling in? You should try. You will know it. Because you will get Africa, Antarctica, Asia, amoeba, different shapes and sizes. That's it. That is its shape. But you can also claim each made is a unique shape, non-repeatable. The uniqueness can be sold. It's akara. Similarly, we have our akara. And that akara, that shape, that form that we carry is called ahankara. Abhimana is the self-worth. And the shape of that which we carry is called the ahankara, or the ego. Now, after having ascertained one's own worth, we are quite good at marketing one's own self. We are quite efficient at that. We don't need any MBA on that. To market oneself, I think it is a psychological default setting, and we market ourselves ruthlessly. Whatever is the image that I have of myself, I want to carry it so efficiently that everybody that I interact with, I project this image of mine constantly. Constantly I project myself. And in projecting myself, many a times, what I end up doing is I modulate it. I enhance it. Lot of patchwork done, because I know it is not a very beautiful thing to project. So I enhance its beauty. What I am, my self-worth, is not projected as is. Say supposing there is one particular aspect when you are not that very qualified, or you are dumb about it. Does anybody project their own dumbness? And the most surprising thing is, however dumb somebody is, does not want to accept that they are dumb. Isn't it true? I think I am making sense. So we constantly keep projecting. See, projection is the first layer. Now the second layer is, after I project, it can be accepted it can be rejected. If it is accepted, there is no issue. But then the problem starts when what I project is not accepted. Then instead of projecting, I start pressuring it into that system. So first, I have my self-worth, and that self-worth may or may not be in a presentable condition. So I do a lot of, foundation, mascara, or what? How do you pronounce it? Okay, whatever you pronounce, you got the point. I've been corrected many times on that. Then add a little blush to it. Then the eyeliner. Then the eyelashes. You get the point. So I am trying to enhance, beautify it more than what it exactly is, and then project it. Now in our own interactions, if I find somebody that I am interacting, what they are projecting about themselves and what they are actually, there is a discrepancy. We may want to hide it, but people around us are constantly evaluating us. Aren't they? Are we not evaluating others? How many of you have come for the first time to this lecture? So can I put a little pressure on you? So as soon as you come, pata nahi satsang, some new environment, okay, let's try it out. And right from the first instance, are we not trying to evaluate the person? Which happens to be me. Are we or are we not? We constantly evaluate. Even those that we are constantly interacting and know of, that also is constantly evaluated. So whenever there is a discrepancy, whenever there is a gap between what they are and what they are projecting, would you like to constantly keep interacting with such people? What do we call such people as? Criticals. I heard it critical. Critical, though, we have not reached the critical stage yet. They are hypocritical. Right? Because there is a discrepancy, there is a gap. And we want to be on guard. We don't want to be completely interacting with them. If provided an opportunity, we want to withdraw from interacting with such people. So there is a rejection. And how do we handle that rejection? The ego gets punctured. And I say, I am hurt. My ego is hurt. Why? Because of what I think of what I am, first layer. What I think should be acceptable by the surroundings, second layer. And what I project finally, third layer. And the fourth layer is their acceptance and rejection. Can you imagine how much constantly we are khachpach inside? Constantly! You enter into a situation, you are constantly evaluating. Who is looking at me, who is not looking at me? Who is smiling at me, who is not smiling at me? Who is trying to look at me or look through me? And constantly in the background. And thank goodness, Bhagavan and his creation is so beautiful that he has not put a screen here, an LCD, wherein whatever is happening in the back end is displayed on the front end. Then they would have found a market to cover that gloriously. Imagine what would have happened if all that what we are thinking, processing, There is not a single moment wherein our mind is at rest. Constantly evaluating. Why did they look at me? It's still not smiling. Why are they looking at me? Why are they smiling? Try this at your own risk, okay? I have tried it. Go to an unknown environment. Totally unknown environment. And try it at your own risk. I have given my disclaimer. And then pick the pick of the day. Some person and keep staring at them.
Oh my God. You don't want to be in trouble.
That's exactly what I said. Do it at your own risk. I have tried it. Just keep looking at them. When some stranger is looking at you, sometimes we don't even know that somebody is looking at you, but you feel that somebody is staring at you. The consciousness inside gets pricked. Somebody is staring. So you look around. Okay. First you have to confirm, ascertain. Is he looking at me only? And then you look around yourself. Nobody else behind you. Again you look. Okay, he's looking at me only. And then you want to check yourself. Am I looking weird? Am I okay? Am I looking obnoxious? Am I looking out of place? Why is that person looking at me? Then again you look. Still looking. Still looking at you. And then finally, what? What? Why are you staring at me? When you're looking at somebody, there is a calculation happening. Why are they looking? Why are they smiling? And the smiles also have got lot of different shades of meanings. They're not smiling at me, they are laughing at me. Or they have a sarcastic smile. And we start reading a lot. And once we go through lot of painful experiences with people, the inside environment is like a constant tornado. Constantly spinning. I know why they are looking at me. I know why they are not looking at me. I know why they are speaking to me, by the way. Not really. And such person you come and sit for meditation. Inside what is happening? There's so much of turmoil, of restlessness, that there is not an ounce of possibility to find peace. And then we react when our projected image is not accepted. Now you tell me, logically I have gone through sequence so far. If there is a discrepancy, should it be accepted? Yes or a no would be fine. I know you are in a deep thought. It should not be accepted. If it should not be accepted, why do we project ourselves that way? And feel disappointed that, when a small kid says this, it looks cute. Nobody cares for me no more. It looks cute. When an adult says it, it looks dirty, ugly, yuck. And a small little kid, 4 or 5 year old, with that chubby little cheeks, says, nobody cares for me more. It looks good. Now the next important thing. Most of these calculations of self-worth, self-esteem and self-projection gets ruptured not with some unknown factors. Definitely not. Like, let me take an example. How many of you don't drive? Raise your hands. Yes, kids also. Apart from them, the rest of you drive? Very good. Now, question for those who drive. At least this happens quite regularly in Texas. If somebody has a pickup, you know that they are not going to give you signal. They will, swing into your lane and get out of the lane at their own free will because they have a pickup. And that's the mindset. When somebody, cuts in without a signal, do you get what happens to you? Why should I presuppose? What happens? How do you react?
Get angry, like they didn't give signal and they merge like that.
Become more peaceful.
What do you do? Say that again.
Become more peaceful.
Cut in front of him. Don't ask.
Then you don't need this class. You definitely don't need the class. You can come here. For the rest of us, when somebody cuts in, suddenly, without any indication, we get irritated.
So now it's right.
And we start, commentary. पता नहीं कहाँ जाया. गवार.
Bada.
I did not say it. And then you honk, and then there is one expression which I still don't understand. They are utterly frustrated. I have seen that they hit on their wheels. तुम्हारे हाथ दर्द हो गया. They hit. They show their frustration. How long does that frustration last?
Depends on the person. Depends on the person.
However be that person. How long does it last?
Few minutes.
Maybe minute or two.
It is purely momentary. Now the moment you cross into, you take another lane or you take an exit and it's done. It doesn't even last in your brain. Right? But imagine somebody that you know, somebody that you care for, love for, have concerns for, does something. How long does that irritation last?
No.
Point and case. And would it be wrong if I make an assumption that 95% of our life, 95% of our life is in dealing with these constants in our life? Whether it is at family, whether it is at office, whether it is at peers, whether it is at social, wherever it is these constants, right? These are the people that you know. 95% of our life is in this known parameters. Would it be an exaggeration to calculate that 95%? Yes?
No.
Wrong.
98%.
She also understood it, so I didn't take it seriously. Or else I would have to go into one by one sequentially, try to explain how it is 95%. But since most of you agreed, let's move forward. 95% of our life is on a constant, right? You constantly interact with these people. And these are the people that we often say that we care for them, we have concern for them, we love them. I love you, kiddo, I love you, honey, I love you, these are the constants. Now these constants are the key vulnerabilities as well. Right? And because of these constants, when there is a frustration, it is long lasting, quite long lasting. And in these constants, when there is this projection of the self and the discrepancy along with it, as how it is being projected and how it is, of the self-worth, how we carry it forward, how we convey it forward in interacting with these constants. How long can anything that is fake stand? Can it stand? Because 95% of it is constantly repeated, constantly you are interacting with them. And anything that you carry as fake,
What does he say?
you just punctured my ego, man. All this explanation done. It's down the drain. Can I borrow him for every satsang? So that he'll keep me grounded.
You are going to his house only tomorrow.
Oh. It's a very beautiful example, like. When you are trying to talk to your children, when you are trying to talk to your spouse, when you are trying to communicate and you carry your projected image and you are trying to, and then the other side, what exactly are you trying to say? I don't even get a sense of it. You don't make sense of anything. All that you are carrying about yourself gets busted right there. It bursts. The bubble bursts. And then comes the chaos. Chaos because something inside has been so badly wounded, ruptured. And that rupture sometimes is so serious that we carry these ruptures not for a day, two, but sometimes even 20, 30, 40 years. You know, some wounds that are lacerating for about 30, 40 years. Some incident, some freak incident that happened 20 years ago and you're still carrying that wound. It literally is 20 saal baad. A horror story. Like I asked somebody, I was in a place and I had to go to someone's house. So this person volunteered, he said, I'll drop you there, Swamiji, I'll not step inside. I mean, the way he said it, I understood, kuch to gadbad hai, there is something wrong here. I said, what happened? Nothing, Swamiji, nothing. Then what? Oh, this goes back, way back then, you know. And we still carry those things. And how we carry those things on our shoulder is such a huge burden. Day after day, year after year, we are carrying this burden forward. And it's not just in the, in your travel or in your flights, the travel light. Even in life, travel light. Travel light is the key for delight. But we carry those burdens, unresolved, still puncturing, still cutting. The problem is not because of this outside world. The problem is with our own self and its assessment. If you look at it from that substantial standpoint, does it really matter what kind of house you live in? Does it really matter what kind of car you drive? Does it really matter what kind of clothes you wear? Sometimes when the kids get into that, it starts from that age. What do you call it? The technical word is peer pressure. Everybody else in the environment or classroom or in the friends, they start wearing the brand. Some of these brand names I can't even pronounce them. Aero, Aeropost, Aber, ये सब नाम मुझे I can't pronounce them. But one name that I do know and I can pronounce it is Gap. Because that brand, it is worth to its name. There is more of Gap and less of cloth. Does it really matter what? It has to be decent, yes. From that substantial point, nothing of this matter. But we end up spending entire life's worth in trying to create it and maintain it. Because of that association, we sweat, toil, not just to earn it and maintain it, but to gather respect of what I am maintaining so that others look at me in awe. So that there is that awesome feeling. By the end of the life, it's an awful feeling. English is a strange language. When it is awe, and it is a positive feeling when it is some. And when it is awe and it is full, it is a negative feeling. Strange language. That we have spent entire life's worth efforts in maintaining something, creating something, maintaining something, and then rubbing it on every aspect of our interaction. That I am like this, accept me. And when it is not accepted, I feel hurt and complain that others are hurting me. Now let us get to, now we have understood the self-worth, we have understood the analysis of it. Have I gone step by step? Where is Gopi? Acha. Why are we all here? One basic thing is because he opened his doors. Right? We are thankful for that. That's all. After we are inside, he cannot sit and I don't know why these people are inside. See, we are inside because they have allowed us inside, right? If the doors were not open, I'm talking about legal means. If the doors are not open, would it be possible for us to be inside? No. Similarly, the doors of our heart and the inside of our heart feels ruptured only when we allow this to creep inside. Without it being allowed inside, do you think it has any vulnerability to create any rupture inside? There was once a Mahatma. He was being criticized. And there are always these Sishyas who are quite hyper, quite enthused and hyper. They said, Mahatma ji, you go, we'll just come. So Mahatma ji looked at it, just leave it, come. How can you leave somebody when they are criticizing it, when they don't have, He's getting all that, hyper, and he wants to go settle it. So he says, that where I am, nothing of what they said can ever reach. If it has not reached, why would I react to something that has not even reached? After this lesson was done, between the students, one criticized the other, and both of them came complaining to this Mahatma. So the Mahatma took both of them for a walk. And in India, the trash can, or the, what do you call them, the bigger ones? Dumpster. So the dumpsters, there is more of the dump around the dumpster rather in. Right. So he took them to that nearest dumpster and he said, if somebody were to sit here and constantly complain that there is so much of trash being thrown at me, so the problem is not of the people who are throwing trash, it is your problem that you are sitting in a dumpster. And that dumpster is called ego. We create our own image and demand from the society, demand from our interactions that that image be accepted, not just accepted, respected, not just respected, but promoted as well. That is when we feel really satisfied. So the first layer of satisfaction, that they accept of whatever I am projecting. It is very clear. Whenever there is a turf of issue between Srimati and Shripati, husband and wife, right? One of the most common dialogues. Don't ask me how did I know it. One of the most common dialogues of interaction. You are not the same person like you were. You have changed. You don't love the same way like you used to love. You don't care the same way that you used to care. Obviously. In the initial days, you want to impress the other person, and in impressing you are projecting all that which you can possibly project. But in order to have something projected and still be supported, there should be something reality to substantiate it. The kids have this construction project. They have to construct a bridge or something. Whether it is Legos or with any other material, they have to construct it, right? So when you construct those bridges, how far can you take the bridge without a support? What will happen to that bridge?
Collapse.
Definitely collapse. So in the initial days, it is like that projection without a support. So what will happen over a period of time? Sometimes it is 3 days, sometimes it is 3 weeks, sometimes it is 3 years, however long. That a make-believe picture, that image, it will crash. And how much of it will be remaining? That which can be sustained by that which is real. Isn't it true? Instead of focusing on working in perfecting oneself, we try projecting oneself without perfecting. That is the key issue of soreness in our self-esteem, self-worth and self-projection. Instead of perfecting that self, we keep projecting that which we are not. Like I got this, once a letter, and what caught my attention was, the letter said, Dear Swami Sarveshananda, my name is legally, even my license and other things still are on Brahmachari Uddhav Chaitanya. So somebody calling me, I said somebody must know me, so I opened the letter. And it was quite philosophical, first paragraph. How you carry yourself and how you go and interact with others. The first impression has to be really a good, substantial impression, not a hollow impression, and things like that. And it all starts with your smile. The second paragraph. And your enhanced smile with whiteness of your teeth. And then I looked at it, it was a dentist who was giving me a $50 coupon for the first attempt. Whiten your teeth. So that you have you have a confidence about who you are, what you are. Danto sir? With the teeth? Anything more substantial I would have given in. With the teeth? And that is the whole difference between the philosophy of East and philosophy of West. Philosophy of West is that ego is promoted, projected, enhanced, and there are means and methods taught to enhance it. Whereas the philosophy of East, they have gone quite deep in trying to understand this whole concept of ego. Instead of glamorizing it, they peel it open to find that which is really substantial and that alone be projected. And once you peel, you don't even need to project. It is self-illumining that it does not need an effort to be projected. So this soreness can be addressed if we truly understand what this self means. And that is the purpose of spirituality. Now when I say spirituality, it includes both ritual as well as the philosophy. Both put together. One devoid of the other, it is meaningless process. Philosophy without the ritual, it is like eyes without hands and legs. Ritual without philosophy is like having hands and legs without eyes. Even in science, there are two streams. One is called pure science, and the second one is called applied science. Can both of them work away from, exclusively from each other? It doesn't make sense. Both of them have to go hand in hand. So, in the platform of spirituality, wherein both aspects of philosophy and ritual, a practical application of philosophy in day-to-day practice. Practical application of it. So that we work on this layer of understanding the self, truly assessing it, and abiding in its true nature, and that alone being projected, that alone being brought forward in interactions. Does the premise of spirituality make sense? Now, at how many layers are we existing? We exist in 3 different layers. Here when I say BMI, it means body, mind and intellect. at a physical level, at an emotional level, at a level of ideas, intellect. And there are 3 methods prescribed to fine tune each one of them, so that the ugly layers of this ego associated with each one of these layers can be scrubbed and peeled out. Working against one's own ego is the most painful process. Therefore, the masters have asked every student that has stepped in the Upanishads, do you have the courage to walk this path? Because you need immense strength to work on yourself. Nayamatma balahinena labhyaha is a statement of Upanishads, Mundaka Upanishad. Atma, or the true identity of self, cannot be gained by somebody who is balahina. Balahina, the one who does not have courage. So my question to you, do you have that strength? Do you have that courage? Dhiratvena eva labhyaha. Those who don't have strength or courage cannot gain this. But those who are dhira, now what does dhira mean? Courage, brave. But the actual meaning of the word dhira is the one who has immense patience. Like in Hindi they say dhiraj dharo. There dhiraj means what? Have patience. Patience is the key there. Why do we need patience? It is not because of the world that we are working with. Patience because we are working with ourselves. So with regards to the physical level, the modus operandi, the mode applied at the physical level is called karma yoga. It's very simple, beautifully aligned. At the level of emotions, it is called bhakti yoga, path of devotion. How do you channelize those emotions so that we ascertain the true value of that self? Through the path of knowledge, we fine tune and ascertain the true value of self at the intellectual level. When once ascertained at all these 3 levels, then the student is fit, the seeker is fit to abide in that nature of the self. And that happens through meditation. So in our scriptures we find that there are 4 paths: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Dhyana Yoga. So why do we require these 4? So that at the first 3 levels of body, mind and intellect, we rip apart one by one layers of, and that happens through meditation. So in our scriptures we find that there are 4 paths: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Dhyana Yoga. So why do we require these 4? So that at the first 3 levels of body, mind and intellect, we rip apart one by one layers of self-confessed wrong identities. That akara, that shape that we have, that shape has to be reascertained. In order to reascertain that, the mana, the abhimana, has to be washed clean. And the process of washing is called karma, jnana, bhakti. Once having washed and ascertained what is the true value of that self, to abide in that is called dhyana. So today we spoke about three aspects. One, what is abhimana, self-worth. What is ahankara, and how do we work backwards to ascertain the true value of self. Now, another 5 minutes I'll stop so that you can ask questions. Are we there at that stage wherein we have ascertained at all three levels and abiding in the self? Yes or a no?
No.
We are not perfect yet. Right? Until then, how do we interact with the world? Because in my gauge of myself, I may not need these values. But in my interaction, I am not yet that firm as to who I am, the self within. So there is high probability of me being misused, abused, and that keeps hurting again and again. How do I move forward from here? What is the next step? Therefore, the scriptures have suggested that create a boundary around yourself of self-worth. Have pride in what you are rather than trying to project what you are not. Have pride in it. But this pride and the boundary that you have created around yourself of what you are or who you are is not a permanent boundary. It is a temporary fencing. And what is the idea? That as you grow stronger and stronger within, you start reducing these boundaries from all angles. The stronger you grow, like when you have in the garden a sapling or a new plant that has been brought in. So you have two rods and you have two wires tied down to those two rods. How long does that support? Is that support required? What happens if the tree is growing but you forgot to cut that support? That very point where you had given that support becomes the weakest point for that tree to fall. Isn't it? Similarly, the boundary that we are trying to have now of self-respect is not a permanent one. It is a temporary one wherein it has to be constantly worked at reducing it. Once that complete strength within and abundance within is ascertained, you don't need a boundary anymore. That is when you can mix with anybody with the concept Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That the entire world is nothing but Lord and His expression. And that is where Gurudev in his pledge, he says, service to the nation is service to the Lord of the Lords. Service to the people is service to the Supreme. So that being the goal, we know where we are. Now we have to pave our path meticulously to reach there. Having reached there, it gives us two things: peace and happiness. By understanding and applying this, it gives us one thing. What? It removes unnecessary added stress, pressure, pain, misery in life. So dukkha nivritti happens through this. Ascertaining through that happens, it gives us peace and happiness. So now chalk out your life as to how you have to route yourself to reach there. Because nobody else can vouch for where we are other than ourselves. So I rest my case. In the past 1 hour 10 minutes, if I have 1 hour 10 minutes, if I have created any confusing statements or anything that was not clear, I take complete responsibility to answer them. So meaning, ask questions which are related to what we have spoken. Don't ask me questions which are out of syllabus. Now the floor is yours. Yes.
I may have missed this point. What's the difference between Abhiman and Ahankar?
Can somebody say that? You did miss it because I did define it. You all were listening, so please answer. Did I define them both? अरे हाँ बोलो ना बोलो कुछ तो बोलो. I did define, right? So please explain it to her.
Abhiman is self-worth and Ahankar is ego. My understanding.
Yeah.
Yes. But can you define it further so that she gets a better clarity? So Abhimana is self-worth as to how we calculate ourselves, as to what is my worthiness. Because of that, I create an image of myself, a form, a akara. Akara of that aham is called ahankara. That is called ego. That was an easy question.
I have a question, Swamiji. I'm very curious about how the Diraha is equal to courage.
Diraha?
How do you develop courage with patience?
What's the question?
How do you develop patience and courage?
You need courage. You need courage to develop that.
Yeah, how do you develop that courage? Is his question. He asked both. How do you develop that patience? How do you develop that courage? There is a prayer that I love. It is called Serenity Prayer. Have you heard that Serenity Prayer? It's a beautiful 3 lines. O Lord, give me serenity to accept that which I cannot change. Give me serenity to accept that which I cannot change. Give me strength to change that which I must. The 3rd line is the best line, punch line. Give me wisdom to know the difference. We lose patience because of lack of this clarity that I seem to forget that which can be changed and that which cannot be changed. In my interaction, there is the world, there is my experience with the world, and the experiencer me. What I want to change is the experience or the quality of experience. Right? So in changing that, there are two other parameters, experiencer and the experienced. Truly speaking, can you change the world? But we forget. And all our efforts, frustratingly, are when we try to change the world. O Lord, let me have the serenity to accept that which I cannot change. Understand what cannot be changed. Give me strength to change that which I must. And what is it that can be changed? Myself. This understanding builds patience and courage. Because that which frustrates is taken away. What remains is patience.
Like, what are some good ways to identify when the ego is prone? I mean, on a day-to-day basis. So,
There's a huge list. Her question is, what are the prominent ways to detect that my ego is out there functional?
yeah, that it's that it's a projection of an image. And it's not me. And once you identify it, then you should try to figure out how
A good
you
question,
can exist
because
more real.
it gives me an opportunity to project and promote myself. Because this question is the very theme that we will be dealing 2 days from now, I think. Mind games. Management versus manipulation. So which is when I will be speaking about that exhaustively. But in a short nugget, there are 3 patterns of ego. Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. Tamasic ego is totally with the perspective of being completely selfish. Rajasic is ready to get out of that selfish zone as long as there is some returns. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Friend in need is friend in need. I am helping you, you help me later. That is the Rajasic one. And the Sattvic one is selfless. When there is absolutely nothing demanded, expected out of the interaction. So with these 3 parameters, you can now ascertain which level am I and where do I progress towards. But further details in that session. So 10 more minutes, so at least 2 more questions, there is time. You don't need to hurry in trying to create a question. If you have a question, ask.
Well, you mentioned that to make a boundary of ourselves in our interaction. That kind of like, so basically, because we need something, we need some sense of who we are to interact, and we want the minimum we are to interact, and we want the minimum projection possible. So right now it might be out here because we're projecting more, but then the goal is to project less and less and become more closer to the true self. So when we make that boundary, we should figure out how am I projecting, and what is, and is that level of projection necessary, or can I maybe project a little bit less? Is that the goal?
It's totally up to you.
Yeah.
as to how you work on it. There are some really intense keen seekers who have understood this concept and immediately dropped that whole boundary. And there is a high probability of being misused or abused. And many masters have been abused. But they did not turn around and say that, why me? They are ready for it. And in their utmost prayers they said that, "O Lord, forgive them, they do not know what they do." They sought forgiveness for their behalf. Now, such ones are very few who have dropped it immediately. Do you have that kind of stamina to drop it? If not, work, but work slowly and effectively, rather than being in a hurry to drop it and then they say "Dhobi ka kutta na ghar ka na ghat." That you are neither here nor there. You are on one side you want to drop it, the other side you cannot drop it. You are stuck somewhere in between. So don't do a hodgepodge job. Do it slowly, but hasten slowly. Like the flower can unfold itself into a good blossom when it is naturally happening. When you try ripping it, it is no more a blossom. So let the natural path pave itself. Yes.
Swamiji, I guess we all know how we are in terms of how we deal with the world, meaning only that we understand we are not perfect, obviously, right? So can you help us understand how the masters are, how different they would be in dealing with the world? Because they have to deal with the world too, and they obviously have the knowledge. So how are they
I'll give you an
able
example.
to perform at that level without, if they don't have any motivation like salary, etc., right? So how are they able to perform all the time at that motivation that somehow
They are not
we are hoping to
motivated.
get?
They are not motivated. I mean, everybody heard her question, right? They are not motivated, but they are constantly inspired. The reason that they are constantly inspired is because they are connected to a source which is undeniably a permanent source, and they have no fear of losing it. So when you have reached to that core of your state of blissfulness, and you know it is not something that is going to be lost. See, our happiness is little, and we may agree to share a little bit of it with people around, but majority chunk of it I want to keep it for myself. Right? But they have found that inner source, and they are constantly inspired because they have nothing to lose. So therefore their effort out there is, they even sing, there is a song, Ram Naam ke Hire Moti. He doesn't say take, loot sako to loot. That I have gotten so much of plenty that how much ever you want to take, please take. And I don't want anything in return. So the equation is never going to be toppled. It gets toppled only when I start expecting. They don't have that expectation. So they only give. And in true sense, that alone is called love. When you can give without expecting. So their every action is inspired because of that love in expression. Gopiji, you had a question. That would be the last one.
Yeah, similar lines, but sometimes when something doesn't go well, or a lot of things happen that's not what you're expecting, we feel like sometimes worthless, right? Am I really? So that's what so how do we deal with that? And
I had mentioned to draw a boundary, and that boundary is drawn from understanding at a physical level, at an emotional level, at an intellectual level, at different resources level. What am I truly? What am I skilled at? What am I not skilled at? What am I talented in? What am I not talented in? So I ascertain those things. As long as I maintain that clarity, I don't feel myself trapped in feeling worthless. Meaning, if I do feel worthless, it means my clarity has been clouded. So I step back and reassess myself, gain that clarity, and instantly, as soon as the moment that clarity dawns in, that sense of worthlessness is removed.